right, here we go. This is the Santa Cruz Hightower as part of our all mountain bike showdown. It is the first of 4 bikes. We've got the Hightower, obviously, the Ibis Ripmo, the Yeti SB130, and the Transition Sentinel. So if you want to see how all of those bikes stack up, stick around. First things first, let's jump into what the Hightower is. It's an all-mountain bike. It's got 145 millimeters of rear travel, 150 millimeters up front. It does have adjustable geometry. I tested in the low setting because it puts it closer to everything else in the test. So 65.2 degrees on the head tube angle, 76 degrees on that seat tube angle. In extra large, the size I rode, I'm 6'2" for reference. The reach is 490 millimeters, wheelbase is 1261 millimeters, and that chainstay is 434 millimeters. So all of these geometry numbers are pretty well rounded. They're not super extreme, and Santa Cruz kind of does that on most of their bikes, where they build a very usable bike, a bike that isn't, you know, super geared one way or the other in terms of geometry. That makes it very usable for a wide range of people. The thing that defines this bike for me is that lower link VPP suspension platform. It's super plush, it's really soft off the top, and it just kind of sits down a little bit lower, and you're just kind of riding on a cloud. It's pretty spectacular. I feel like that is the defining characteristic of this bike. You have the geometry that's fairly mild-mannered, well-balanced, but then you have this suspension platform that lets you get away with murder. It makes it very stable, calm, planted, controlled underneath you when you're riding. So suspension design, that is 90% of what makes this bike what it is. Let's jump into those ride impressions right now.
All right, we are high-towering today as part of our all-mountain bike showdown. Got this, the Ibis Ripmo, the Transition Sentinel, and the Yeti SB130. So this is probably my favorite category of bike. I was looking back over the years at all my favorite bikes, and they all kind of range in that like 140, 150 rear, 160 front travel category. These are the kind of bikes I like to ride, so I'm really excited to do this showdown. So some of the things I'm noticing right off the bat with this bike, it feels a little taller on that front end. Like per size, you know, all of these are XLs. So per size, this one feels like it's got the tallest front end. It also has 800 mil bars. So that's probably a little bit of why that front end feels tall and big maybe. This one feels like it's got the slackest seat tube angle. There's some ambiguity about seat tube angles. You know, it all depends on the height they're measured at. So while this one's right in the mix on paper, at my saddle height, feels a little slacker than some of the others. The bike's efficient enough. It's not a big deal, and the head tube's not super slack, so your weight is still fairly centered over the bike. I'm not wheeling in too much or losing control of the front end on the climbs here. But even though this reach is in the ballpark, or, you know, on the shorter side compared to the other bikes, I do feel like I'm having to stretch out the handlebars a bit more. That lower link VPP suspension design is really good. It's pretty balanced. It's not quite as efficient as, say, the Ripmo. It doesn't have that acceleration or quite as lively of a pedaling platform as the Ripmo, but it gives you a lot of traction on the way up, and that can be really beneficial when your trails are bumpy. And I don't feel like I'm just wasting a ton of energy bobbing up and down. Bike still moves forward like it should. So more on that suspension platform. You know, the bike gets into the travel pretty easy, so it really smooths out all the bumps, even on the climbs. Also helps keep that wheel on the ground for better traction. So you can stand up when it gets really steep. It's harder to slip out on this bike than some of the others. You know, that suspension's actively pushing. I just ate a bug. Pushing that rear wheel into the ground. So when the trail gets bumpy and rocky, that suspension is really nice. you know, it makes this bike a very, very good climber. On kind of that smoother stuff, you know, I think some of the others are faster, a little more efficient. But it's tough to beat this one in the rough technical climbing. All right, so climbing performance on this guy, it's really not bad at all. Sits right there in the middle of the pack. I wouldn't be upset if this was my daily driver. I think the Ritmo will outclimb it for sure. That Ritmo is pretty exceptional, but I think it hangs with all the other bikes in the test. That SB130 might outclimb it as well, but this one's really good when things get rough and bumpy. Overall, solid climber. All right, going downhill on the Santa Cruz Hightower now. Ooh, all the snow's melted. Nice. Woo. So the Hightower, if there's one word to describe that suspension feel, it's plush. While this trail isn't particularly challenging or technical, it's pretty bumpy. There's a lot of embedded rock, and it's never really smooth. But the Hightower makes it feel smooth. Talking about how it really smooths out the trail on the uphill, does the same on the downhill. Woo! So, Hightower, extra plush, really smooth through all this like embedded rock. It does it in a way that doesn't feel too like dead, you know. Sometimes plush can mean hard to get off the ground or not lively and fun. The Hightower isn't the poppiest, but it still is fairly lively. It's not just wheels on the ground dead. You can get some good bunny hops off of it. You can get it in the air pretty easily. Santa Cruz makes very usable bikes. What I mean by that is they aren't extreme. They kind of strive for good compromises, it seems like. You know, Hightower, not the fastest climber in the bunch, not the burliest ascender in the bunch, not the poppiest or liveliest, but it's a very good blend of all of those good attributes you want in a bike. Oh, that was slick. Woo. So Geo on the Hightower feels, again, pretty well balanced for the downhill. 65.2 degrees on the head tube angle in the low setting that I've got it in. Feels slack enough to go ride, you know, all your stuff. It's an all mountain bike. You're not going to shy away from things because of that head tube angle. But also doesn't feel too much like a sled or a tank or a pig because, you know, front end's a little bit steeper. That helps a bike be a little more nimble and responsive. Whew. We've got plenty of plow because of the suspension design. You know, we don't have plow geometry so much, but we've got really good, capable suspension, and that'll help you kind of heels down, plow through the rocks. Seeing corners great. You know, that head tube not being as steep helps that wheelbase stay under control at 1260-ish millimeters. And that's always going to help a bike in the nimble category. Traction is awesome because of that suspension design, so that helps with corners as well. This bike kind of hangs out in that mid-stroke quite a bit, it seems like. I think that's why it's so plush. So, you know, you kind of push into a corner and you don't get like shot out the backside of it as much. But it does have this very composed, stable feeling in the corners because of that. I think because you can get into that suspension just a little bit better. It gives you a lot of stability and control, quite a bit of confidence to come around the corner quickly. Talk about some of the jumping characteristics of this bike. You know, you've got quite a bit of pop, especially for how plush this thing feels. It pops pretty well. Sneaky little, yeah, see, makes that kind of stuff easy to clear. Yeah, you can bunny hop this pretty well. So like I was saying, this bike, or this trail, is never extra challenging or super chunky, but it's far from smooth. In fact, it's like never smooth. Okay, sorry, had to focus there. But this bike really smooths it out. It like is a magic carpet ride. It's pretty impressive how well this thing smooths it out. And then I think it still has kind of that more lively geometry to keep it from just being a full-on sled. This bit of trail is really going to highlight how well this bike can smooth out a trail. It gets a little rough in here. So, who is this bike for? You know, it's an all-mountain bike, so it's for someone looking to ride everything. For someone who wants to go uphill, downhill. But it's on the, you know, the burlier side of that spectrum. It's not a trail bike. So I think this one, for the person looking for that like extra well-rounded all-mountain bike. You know, by nature, an all-mountain bike is pretty well-rounded. And this one is probably the epitome or the quintessential all-mountain bike by that definition. There are bikes in our test that go uphill better, or there are bikes in our test that go downhill better. But I don't know if there's a bike in our test that goes up and down better.
All right, let's jump into who the Santa Cruz Hightower is for. By nature, an all-mountain bike is well-rounded. It should be able to go everywhere on the mountain. It should be able to go uphill, downhill. So if you're looking for an all-mountain bike, the Santa Cruz Hightower is going to do that job, and it's going to do it very well. It goes uphill well. It goes downhill well. It's not the best in the test at either one of those things, but I think it's the best in the test at both of those things combined. So if your riding style is very varied or super diverse, you go uphill a lot, you go downhill a lot, you ride easy stuff, you ride hard stuff, you ride bike park, you ride XC stuff, and you're kind of a jack of all trades yourself, the Hightower is probably going to be your perfect fit because it is the jack of all trades of all mountain bikes. The other person I have in mind for this bike is someone who could probably get away with a shorter travel bike in terms of the terrain and the trails and the conditions they ride, but they're looking for a little more comfort. They're looking for a little more stability, a little more confidence. You know, they don't always ride the toughest, nastiest, gnarliest terrain, but you just don't care about being super fast uphill, and you just want a little extra comfort. So I would say that's probably a really good person for this bike as well. All right, the one-line Santa Cruz Hightower bike review. The Hightower is the most all mountain bike you can buy. So thanks for watching this time. Again, we've got 3 more bikes coming up. We've got the Ibis Ritmo, the Yeti SB130, and the Transition Sentinel. If you're interested in purchasing any of these bikes, we know inventory is a little tricky, tough to find right now. Please reach out. We'd be happy to help you find one, whether you live East Coast, West Coast, right in the middle of the country. Let us know. And thanks for sticking around. We'll see you next time.